This is Different by Nature, the podcast uncovering the interesting and unusual stories hidden in the outdoor spaces around us. I'm your host, Hannah Sayers, and welcome to Real Life Outside. Welcome to our next episode, and I've got a very exciting guest. Stuart McLeod has joined us. Hello, Stuart.
Hello, good to be here.
How are you?
Oh, yeah, I'm well, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. And Stuart, do you want to tell our listeners who you are?
Sure, yeah. So I suppose in terms of the day job, I'm one of the area directors at the National Lottery Heritage Fund, so I kind of oversee the funds business in London and the south of England.
Fab. And you do other things as well, do you?
I do other things as well, yeah. So on the side, if you like, I've trained some years ago as a mindfulness teacher, and I also offer workshops and residential retreats, either focusing around walking or running in nature.
Amazing. I'm sure we'll dig into that in a little bit as well. And you brought something, did you?
I have, yes. Yeah. So sadly, the book that's sat in the kitchen somewhere that I made to bring, I have a photograph of a book. So it's called The Tree Book.
Okay.
And it was a book that accompanied a Channel 4 TV series in the early 90s that kind of really stuck with me. So I think trees have always kind of been my thing, I suppose, in terms of my go-to in terms of the natural world. And I think what was particularly interesting about that series was it also tapped into kind of folklore and mythology around trees as well. So I kind of did a lot of this. I think it's something like 1992 comes to mind when the TV series was. And I've just always really been interested more in that kind of, that folk dimension of nature as well. And just kind of, there's something that's always fascinated me, I suppose, kind of going back into history about kind of how we've connected with nature on that kind of more mythical level.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I absolutely loved that. When I was growing up, I always loved to imagine that there was fairies in the trees, or the Roald Dahl's Min Pins. I don't know if you read that. There's a park that I went to for years and years and years, and we always had a tree that was called the Min Pin tree that I was convinced they lived in there. And it's quite interesting, isn't it, to see we've slightly lost that a little bit, really, haven't we?
I think so. That was my that was kind of my starting point, I suppose, in terms of engaging people in nature. That's what I was sort of reminding myself. So my first permanent job, I was working in a country park in Chatham, Medway Towns, and I did quite a lot of training around what back in the day was referred to as earth education.
Oh wow, okay.
So this came from the States in the 70s, and in simple terms, the way I kind of describe it is that in terms of environmental education, there's the science that we're trying to communicate to children in particular. Mainly I was working with some primary school children. Sure. But then earth education, I suppose, is also how we engage feelings and emotions with what we're engaging with as well. So I've got this lovely memory of doing a pond dipping session with a school. And as you'll know, with school visits, there needs to be a certain number of parents that come as well as helpers. And having done the science bit, the investigation, we then, I think the sort of the exploration was choose the favourite creature that you discovered in the pond, and then you mimic its movements. And got this lovely memory of the parents joining. I think it was back swimmers was one of the things that we'd happened upon, and just this picture of parents kind of moving backwards, wiggling their bottoms around, and just everyone crying with laughter. And it was just bringing the fun and the joy to learning as well. And this is where I say sort of maybe some of the more kind of folkloric elements, I'd be weaving that into the work that I was doing at the time as well. So.
Yeah. Is it? I'm trying to think if there's many places that are doing that type of stuff now.
I really don't know. And that's kind of one of my slight sadnesses is there was no particular career path for me, but inevitably you kind of end up doing something a bit more managerial, a bit more leadership focused. That's where I found myself. So you come away from a lot of that hands-on. Yeah. Some ways I remind myself I was probably never happier than taking a school group around the park and just engaging them in the joy of nature. Yeah,
my background's in children's play and development. So my degree was in play work. So it was all about being outdoors. That's how I ended up getting into the nature sphere. But it was mainly from having children outdoors and creating like mud faces and all sorts of different things. So was there anything in the book around folklore that stood out for you? That
I was probably at that point just finishing a postgraduate qualification in countryside management. So again, I was very much kind of schooled in the science of it all. And I suppose it was just something that was featured in the TV program that was also just about this idea of nature kind of running through how we relate to life, I suppose. So trees, I guess, go kind of going back into the distant past. They were kind of well, everything, I suppose, from sort of worship of the spirit of nature, if you like, through to all the kind of practical uses as well, their medicinal benefits, that kind of thing. That's I guess some of what I tapped into, probably because of maybe relating to where I was in life at that point in time. We're very disconnected from nature, I suppose. So that was
especially in an urban setting. That's one of the things that I really, obviously I've been born and grown up in London. I did live in the north for quite nearly a decade, so quite some time, and so I did see the difference from like a big town to a small town. But like I do feel like in an urban environment we could foster more of that within our parks and open spaces, which I think is that kind of magical element. And I guess that probably lends itself more to your spiritual and mindful element of what you're doing as well, because you, with folklore, with like mystery or magic, you do take a moment to like be mindful and be quiet, I guess, in those spaces. So do you think that's kind of how that's become one of your interests?
It's a really good question, isn't it? Because I think you can assume about how elements of the pathway have evolved. I suppose kind of you put it quite nicely. So there's something about sort of being still in nature, I suppose, that was always important to me. And now when I'm going to be running a workshop, and we are based in a park in Rochester. Although interestingly, we're going to be running through Rochester High Street as well. So,
okay.
So kind of balancing things up about that's the realities of where we live, if you like, as well. So kind of without going kind of too far down that route, but the thing with working that space of mindfulness is, we can sort of step out by drawing on nature. So I generally choose to locate these workshops in either, really rural areas or using parks in an urban context, because there's something about that sort of stepping out, giving ourselves a bit of space to breathe and to connect. But ultimately, none of this is of any value unless it relates to, the realities of life, the way that we, where we live, how we have to interact with the world. So we do also kind of investigate the kind of how you bring it back to the relevance of your everyday life as well.
I find mindfulness in nature such an interesting concept, because personally, like growing up, I had like agoraphobia, so I was scared of the outdoors and scared of like being in open spaces, which you think like, what are you doing in nature? So I had really severe anxiety, and a lot of that. But then on the flip side, if I'm in a wooded area and it's quiet and I'm listening to the birds, there's nothing more calming. And that's something that I've definitely I'm going to explore more as time goes on. And around like what happens when nature doesn't feel safe, even though it probably is one of the best things to heal.
It is,
just being present in that moment. I think there's no other place more than like a wooded area or an enchanted wood or something.
No, I think it lends itself, doesn't it? Just if we're going to stop and be quiet and look around and notice. Again, you can do that in any environment, but there's something I think particularly rich for me about how we connect the natural world.
I distinctly remember having an interview when I was younger, and I had to wait to be interviewed, but luckily they had a garden outside, so they were like, "Oh, just wait in the garden." And I remember just walking around the garden feeling so calm. I've never forgotten that feeling, and I think that's probably what has then spurred me on to just remain in that area. Just the physical impact of that, like in a situation which is obviously quite stressful, and being put in an environment which actually really helped alleviate that stress. That for me was like, there's no other evidence than this, than what I've just witnessed myself.
And I think there's a lot of, I mean, I'm not particularly well informed around it, but I think there's a lot of science around, blue and green and how we interact in that kind of true space, or the difference that makes to our mood.
Yeah, and I think there's more conversations to be had around how we do that in an urban context as well. A lot of people or a lot of people who are really investigating that tend to say create more pocket parks. If you've got an environment where there's no space, how do you do that? So I think trying to be inventive in that is something that we as a sector need to figure out.
So there's a program that we're currently funding at the National Lottery Heritage Fund. It's in partnership with the National Trust and Natural England. It's called Nature Towns and Cities.
Oh yes.
And in a nutshell, one of the I guess the shift in focus that we have been advocating for in an urban context is looking more at green space from an estate-based perspective, as in what are all the green spaces that fall within this area that you manage, rather than sometimes from an investment point of view. Often what we're doing is we are funding one place and bringing an individual park or green space up to a certain standard, which is great, and that it's not to sort of knock the past investment in that way.
Sure.
But it's understanding more about that kind of more integrated, wider perspective. I'm mindful of there's one of the projects that's being funded currently is in Lewisham, and I think that's exactly what it's looking at, is where are the kind of more neglected, underutilized green spaces, which are potentially very, very important to some communities because it's the nearest access that they will have to nature. So how do we invest in those, but also work with the communities to decide how they want that space to function, how it kind of would offer more value to them, and then looking at the connectivity of green space more widely as well. So I guess that approach, there's so many places that we could take that to really start to make a difference to people.
And if people, for listeners who maybe don't know what the Heritage Fund is, would you give a kind of simple breakdown?
Yeah, so we're one of the sort of principal distributors of the good cause money that's raised through the National Lottery. So we, the word heritage is one of those interesting ones that means different things to different people. We take the easy option of saying we don't define what heritage is. We kind of leave it to the applicant to tell us, because it's that idea of whatever you value from the past that you want to share, conserve, protect, and pass on to future generations. We do help give some ideas about definitions. So the breadth really of what we do would be things like funding for historic buildings, historic environments. Through to museums and archives. We fund a lot around community heritage, so sort of memory, culture. And then the lesser known aspect, where roughly 25% of our investment goes into land and nature. So this is everything from landscape scale investments in national landscapes. So we've got a program right now that's focused on national parks and national landscapes, what used to be the areas of outstanding natural beauty.
Oh yes, yeah.
But we also very much fund urban parks as well. Just sort of given that example of one of the programs that we're focusing on.
Yeah.
And I was reminding myself the other day, not long after I first joined the Heritage Fund, I was under our old structure. I was just working in the London team. And our chair at that point in time, Wesley Kerr, who some people may have heard of, he used to be the BBC's royal correspondent way back in, I think, so 80s and 90s. But he's also got a passion, I think, a sort of a specialism around horticulture. And I remember having a conversation with Wesley about this sense for us both personally. We felt that our investment in parks was really the most important thing that we were doing, because arguably they're probably the most democratic collective heritage assets that we can invest in, that where I think people experience a sense of exclusion from certain aspects of heritage for a variety of reasons. Spaces that they maybe feel aren't for me, I don't see myself here. I think parks offer that opportunity, and you can see it, certainly in urban areas, you can see it, that, you know, everybody visits a park, and we've all got different ways in which we choose to use the space to interact with the space. And so it was great for me when I joined, because actually a lot of the people I was encountering who, as existing staff of the fund, came more from the sort of, you know, more sort of traditional background. There were less people who came more from the kind of natural environment space. So I was particularly pleased, I think, to be able to work in that area, then actually kind of helping support potential applicants and you know, seeing funding move in that direction as well.
And I guess a lot of people may not realise that parks do have a cultural heritage in terms of not just natural heritage, but also, you know, most parks have a story, especially in the kind of like urban context. They were something once upon a time. And we recently did a project in a very traditional park. It's got funding from you guys, so thank you very much for that. We did a community archaeology project, and lots of people were like, why are you digging in a park? But there used to be a stately home there. And I took my son and a couple of children, and one of the girls found a broken charcoal pencil in the ground. And I said, oh, that would have been, you know, some child once upon a time, because it used to be an orphanage, like maybe broke their pencil and lost it. And then a few days later, I took them all I took them to Leeds Castle. And we were doing a trail, and she lost her pencil, and she went, oh, Hannah, I'm going to be one of those people in 200 years that finds the pencil. And I was like, that's my job done. Just to kind of like showcase that actually something like that is amazing, and it's just a local park, but actually is it just a local park? And I think where the Heritage Fund comes in, it is such an important partner for so many of us in the green sector. And I'm so encouraging to hear that you agree that nature is, you know, and parks and green spaces are important to be funded. I'd be interested to hear your perspective as to why you don't think there are other larger funders out there, because you are really the main large funder.
I'm not sort of completely on top, but the National Lottery Community Fund, I think, are looking to increase their investments in, I think their sort of bucket, if you like, is environment. And so there may be more opportunity. And in fact, one of the precursors of the current funding that we're distributing through nature parks and cities, nature towns and cities, it was called Parks for People, and that was that was co-funded by the Heritage Fund and the Community Fund. And in a sense, they were doing the community bit, we were doing the heritage bit. Whereas it never quite works like that anyway, to be honest. In terms of that's how we justified partnering and and co-investing in that way. When it comes, let's say, to, I don't know, like the trusts and foundations, who are often, you know, obviously a big part of that funding jigsaw, you know, they have their own priorities, and those will shift over time. But maybe, you know, perhaps certainly in terms of urban parks, I'm not particularly clear about who else is funding in that space so much.
I feel like you're definitely leading that, you know, you're flying the flag in that way.
One of the challenges that we're finding, though, is that because, as you would appreciate, a lot of applications are most likely to come from local authorities, and we're really seeing the constraints on local authorities. So there's not the volume of applications coming through at the moment that we've seen in the past. For, you know, sort of site specific investments, if you like.
And I do wonder if there is an element of lobbying, or, you know, that needs to happen from like a central government level to kind of really raise the profile. Maybe this podcast can do that. So you've been to Downing Street, you can. Irregular though now.
I think you know, it falls, unfortunately, with parks and green spaces falling into that sort of non-statutory space. It's always been a challenge, I suppose.
And that makes me that always raises an interesting point when people talk to me about lockdown, because obviously parks aren't really a statutory service, and you're like, they definitely were during lockdown.
Yes.
They were a free statutory service for everyone. So yeah, it's quite. I find that quite an interesting thing, and obviously thanks to the Heritage Fund and continuing, and people like you like championing. It's so for people like us in the green sector. It's like it's kind of a bit of a. It's nice to have someone on your side.
We know how difficult things are for local authorities right now. We understand the financial constraints. We understand where the priority needs to go in terms of allocation of budgets. And there's a lot of parks and green spaces teams doing brilliant work in difficult and challenging times at the moment. But we remain an option for investment. We hope to see more of that coming through.
So we've talked about so many different things today, and I really appreciate you being so open and honest around your own personal experiences. My one last question would be, what is your hope that you can influence or change? Anything to do with nature, or what would you like to do in the next kind of like 5-10 years?
I suppose with my sort of the day job, the funding hat on, it's continue, I think, in the direction that I was describing before, around really thinking about the multiple uses and benefits of parks. So, they're everything from just that little wander at lunchtime in your lunch break, getting a bit of air, getting a bit of green space, right through to people using it for fitness, recreation, more sort of specific ways in which they're using it for kind of health and well-being benefits. And then again, as we sort of touched on, more all the sort of ecological services that they provide as well. I think what my hope therefore is that by continuing to offer investment in the way that we do, which is quite broad, that it'll just allow scope for creativity in people's responses to what they want to come forward for with potential applications. So I think, just continuing to sort of widen the net in terms of understanding of green spaces. I'm thinking maybe just perhaps on a personal level, the things that I do outside of work. I don't know, I suppose I feel quite lucky. So I grew up in Buckinghamshire, kind of on the outer fringes of Greater London, you could say. I suppose what the right term would be, sort of a peri-urban environment, if you like. So I sort of grew up in nature on the urban fringe, if you like, and without kind of over glamorizing in a way. It was in those days where you could go out all day as a young child, and most of the time, if I wasn't at a friend's house, we would be at the park. We would be in the woods doing what kids do, if you like, at those ages. And I guess I've always therefore innately, intrinsically felt comfortable in nature and enjoyed the benefits of it, everything through from childhood to adulthood. And I guess in a way that's part of what I'm sharing with some of the workshops that I do. I mean, I was mentioning that we work both in urban and very rural contexts. I've done residential retreats in the wilds of Spain, right through to running a workshop in Victoria Park, for example, in sort of the Hackney Tower Hamlets border in London. And I've got a nice memory of a workshop that we ran there where I think we probably started, 9:00 in the morning of a weekend. And the first run that we would have done was, there was hardly anybody else in the park, just, those who were up early-ish. But by the time we did our final run during the day, the park was absolutely heaving. And it was just that really nice reminder for me of that real sense of diversity of users who were there, with some of the kind of different ways I described earlier on, from people doing their yoga and Tai Chi practice and kicking a ball round through to just sitting down and having an ice cream, feeding the ducks, whatever it might be. And I guess generally my hope for the future is that we can continue to offer those opportunities for everybody to see their local parks and green spaces as being for them to make best use of it in the way that they need, which might vary from day to day, moment to moment. So something along those lines for me.
I mean, that's pretty amazing. just a small thing. That's that feeling and sense of belonging. I think I would love everyone to have that in the future as well. So Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and we're very lucky to have you championing us at the Heritage Fund. So
thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for the invitation.
You were listening to Different by Nature, hosted by Hannah Sayers. If you're struggling with agoraphobia as well, please know that help is available. Speak to your GP or self-refer to NHS talking therapies. You can also find specialist support through charities like Anxiety UK and No Panic. You can find more information about our guest and everything mentioned in this episode in the show notes. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.